Nickinor's Total Pokemon Action is one of the biggest TPIs out there in this community in terms of views and casts. But it has also shown its age as time has gone on, and TPIs have increased in quality. That does raise a question though. What if Nicky's TPA was made in present day, instead of not too long after his TPI had concluded? And that's where I come in. Now, like I've said in my previous what ifs, this video isn't me saying that I could do a better job than Nicky, nor am I saying this is better than the original. This is all in good fun, and just my interpretation of the idea. So if you have any issues/critiques about this video and/or idea, absolutely let me know in the comments, since feedback is a good thing. So with that, let's begin. In this scenario, we'll say that Nicky took a break from TPIs after his first season ended, and then he ended up getting caught up in real life, but he returned years later after he saw Chris return and, well, all these other people doing it and all that jazz. So he's like, okay, I'll just continue with another season. But instead of simply bringing back the cast of season 1 and mixing them with newbies, however, he decides to use strictly new cast members and reduce it to accommodate with the changing times of the community. So instead of 50+ contestants, we instead have 18 newbies competing for the money, directed by the host, Raichu, who is actually a big name in the Pokemon movie industry, whatever you want to call it. So how about we begin with the cast for this what if? Now, for the most part, I've kept the personalities somewhat the same, because if I really wanted to change up a huge amount, I might as well just make a new series altogether, and that's not what this is supposed to be. However, like I said, there's still going to be some changes, and this is going to be executed differently. So, yeah, here's the cast. Corsola, female. Onyx, male. Bagon, male. Victreebel, male. Relicanth, male. Pidgeot, male. Gyarados, female. Pikachu, male. Shuckle, female, and there's no Groudon this time. Pinsir, male. Skarmory, male. Haunter, female. Camerupt, female. Bayleaf, female. Togekiss, female. And Crobat, female, as well as Peachy, who in this version is Pikachu Libre, also a dude. The teams are Team Tyranitar and Team Typhlosion, based on the final two from the first season, and there will be no tribe swap or anything for this version. Now let's tackle the location. Instead of it taking place on a studio lot, it will be in a new location. Introducing the Mega Raichu Plaza, the contestants' home during the competition, and also the place where they'll be competing in throughout said competition, as it is home to high-quality tech that allows for easy-to-create challenges. Speaking of, instead of them competing in movie-inspired challenges, they'll instead be participating in the movie as if it were real life, and whoever survives/accomplishes the task wins the challenge. To give an example, one of them could be a horror movie, and the role is to either beat the killer or survive the night. If they're killed in the movie, then what ends up happening is that they wake up, because in this scenario they'd be hooked up to like the cyber technology or whatever they have set up, technology stuff, mumbo jumbo. It's just that their consciousness would be controlling the characters to prevent them from getting harmed IRL. For the most part. We'll get to that. Now, the hooking up part would be a lot of the challenges to save on injuries, but the challenges themselves would vary in types and complexity. Some could be like what I just described, some could be wipe out the other team in a war movie-like setting, some could even be as silly as entertain the audience in a comedy movie setting. The options are endless for this kind of season, so yeah. Now, as for eliminations, at least for the pre-merge, we'll get to that, they would still go to a bonfire-like area, but they would be given an item signifying their safety, and it's at the bottom too, where things make a massive change, at least for the pre-merge. Here the votes would be read via envelopes like the Oscars, and the one with the least amount of votes would be sent home instead of safe, because like the awards show, the one with the most votes wins, so the bottom two exist for the ones with the least amount of votes this time, not most. Ties will still go the same as normal though. Basically they revote and all that, and if there's a deadlock or something, I don't know, I guess they'll do some challenge. Anyways, let's just get into the alliances. Like the original, we have Onyx, Pinsir, and Victreebel in an alliance, but this time we also have a female Gyarados joining in because, hey, they're perverted in the beginning, Gyarados in this version's also been perverted, so it works out. But I'll cover their story and actions when we get to the story summary of this what if. Until then, let's move on to another familiar alliance, Bayleaf's alliance. This time around, however, due to the lack of Vileplume and Chansey in this version, we'll instead have Bayleaf, Corsola, Camerupt, Togekiss, and Altaria as an alliance to deal with the Hardy Boys mentioned earlier. And yes, that is the name of the alliance. I am not clever. Their story will also be mentioned later, though. As for everyone else, they're either just good-hearted people that can easily get along with others, like Crobat or Skarmory, really old-fashioned like Relicanth, social butterflies like Pidgeot or Haunter, or just form an alliance later on due to story reasons. Bagon would still get coddled by Camerupt, but this does lead somewhere over the course of the season, instead of nowhere like it was in the original TPA. So I think that takes care of the Alliance. Let's get into, well, a summarized version of the story. It's been almost a decade since Nicky's TPI had aired, and Raichu has somehow turned his story of being a host of a total drama parody into a billion-dollar industry. But he wants to make more money. So, why not go back to his roots and do a sequel with new stakes to the mix? And that's where the series comes in. 18 new contestants arrive to the Raichu Mega Plaza, and the series begins. After being put onto teams, they compete in their first challenge. After some really stupid antics, like Onyx and his future alliance being perverted / shitting on the others, Relicanth being offensive, or Skarmory leading his team on the right path after Camerupt leads down the wrong path for most of the challenge, Team Tyranitar wins, and Team Typhlosion goes to elimination. In a close vote, Skarmory is sent home over Camerupt because his kindness and leadership could be seen as a big threat later down the line, and also because Camerupt had formed a sort of deal with her future alliance to keep her over Skarmory, and Pinsir joined in because A thought it would get him closer to his crush, Bayleaf, leading to Skarmory's elimination with the least amount of votes. After this vote, and more attempts by the Hardy Boys / Onyx's alliance, Bayleaf forms an alliance with Camerupt, Corsola, Altaria, and Togekiss in order to take down the perverted boys and girls and their antics. They start by taking action whenever those four try to flirt with this alliance, but then they start to look into the Hardy Boys' past, and think of a way to use that against them in this game. Speaking of, Onyx would form his alliance with Pinsir, Gyarados, and Victreebel around this point in time as well, so there's that. And they work together to get a partner in this game, but to also have each other's back in this game in order to win the prize money. Following this, we'd get Camerupt still coddling Bagon and all that jazz, while the two Pikachu brothers are just chilling, making friends, and just, hey, being good people on their teams. Not really much of a story for that, so, yeah, at least for now. And the same would apply with Haunter, Crobat, and, well, Pidgeot, sadly. They're just being chill people on the cast and not really having much of a strategic game plan. Team Typhlosion would win the next challenge, and Relicanth is sent home over Onyx because while Onyx did nearly cost them the challenge in this situation, Relicanth was becoming too much of a nuisance for the team to deal with, and they felt he deserved to leave over Onyx this time. However, it's at this point, Bayleaf's alliance finds Onyx's secret past of being a former football player quarterback, or just former quarterback, but was removed after cheating on his girlfriend with the coach's wife, and uses this on Onyx's team to get him in trouble. His alliance is surprised about this, but still stick by Onyx, saying that, oh, it was in the past, but internally, Pinsir and Gyarados are terrified about this information. Not only because their secrets could be exposed, but they also begin to realize, well, slowly, that, hey, maybe the way that we're acting isn't right. Maybe we should try to be better than someone who would cheat on their girlfriend and let their hormones ruin their lives. Now, like I said, it's not an immediate fix, but this would be their arc for at least the pre-merge going forward. Working together to survive, but also slowly begin to fix their attitudes and control their hormones better than before. As this is going on, Camerupt and the others are elated to see Onyx's team turn on him for the most part after all the shit he did to them and the other female contestants so far. And as for Onyx, he's pissed, and he decides to go on a rampage against Bayleaf's alliance by utterly thrashing them during the next challenge, which is a fighting-based challenge. And this one was not in VR, or the cyber world, whatever. So, whoops. But, I guess as a sense of bad karma, his team loses ultimately because Gyarados, Pidgeot, and Bagon failed really, really early. And Bagon got it the worst, because he had his arm broken in the challenge, and it was not pretty. Raichu says that he'll be fine and will just heal in a few weeks, or whatever. Raichu's not exactly a surgeon. But this just leads Camerupt to just coddle Bagon further after this challenge, which just pisses Bagon off further, since he's tired of this camel babying him, and he wants to be more independent. And thus, his story arc begins. More on that later. Pidgeot gets sent home in a close vote, again, because despite the team being against Onyx, he did ultimately help them the most in their challenge, and they could have won it if it wasn't for the likes of Pidgeot or Bagon screwing it up. In other words, they basically gave Onyx a mulligan. It's after this elimination that Onyx decides to take an introspective look on himself, and after some soul-searching and thinking, he realizes that, hey, I'm being a shitty leader in person right now. Why don't I work on fixing that? It's after this point that he talks to his alliance and apologizes for being a shitty leader. The others forgive him and all that, and they do focus on ways to survive this game going forward, but yeah, we'll get to that. Victreebel also decides to tone back his perverted antics a bit. However, considering the four, he is the least perverted of the four, so that's not going to be too hard. Now, why am I giving these 4 redemption? Well, 1, to give them more character, and 2, because with writing these kind of characters, I like to believe in a quote from one of my favorite guilty pleasure films.
Everybody should change!
So if I can reasonably do that, I will take that chance to change them, if I can, like I said. Anywho, Onyx also apologizes to the rest of his team for how he's acting, and will show through his actions that he's sorry going forward since he knows words will only do so much. Now, obviously this doesn't absolve him of his actions, but at least with this he's going to show that he's learning his lesson and being a better person, or trying to be. Bayleaf would believe his honesty, but everybody else in the Alliance except for Altaria kind of have their doubts about the apology Onyx made, and think he's faking it to get them on his side and, well, they don't forgive him. Meanwhile, Altaria just doesn't know what to think of this. Over with Bagon, he's starting to train despite his injury, and despite falling on his ass a few times during said training, he is able to do his session decently. This is basically the majority of what he does for a few episodes in terms of the story, so there's no need for me to really bring it up right now until something big happens with it. So, despite Onyx's best effort to help his team win the War Movie Challenge, which was the next one, and even protect his teammates from enemy fire during said challenge, his team ultimately loses again, and he is sent home thanks to Bayleaf's alliance not wanting to take a risk of his apology being fake, and also because he could be a potential threat later down the line, so they figured might as well kill 2 birds. However, Onyx does take it well and leaves. The Alliance, however, won't be safe for too much longer. Bayleaf finds out Victory Bell's past being a former drug addict, and that's when she decides to confront Victory Bell about it. Victory Bell explains that he fucked up in the past and he has been clean for years, but he can understand the concern Bayleaf has. The two are cool after that. Bayleaf apologizes for instigating a situation and all that, but unfortunately the rest of Bayleaf's alliance isn't really cool with Victory Bell after that, because they think that there's more to this story, and they give it some thought, and their conclusion is to tell the others that Victory Bell also hit women when on drugs, and he was racist. And because of their wording and all that, and also because they were truthful before about Onyx, the others believe it, or start to believe it. So when the team loses again, they seem to have a really shitty track record, Victory Bell receives almost no votes at all, which leads to his elimination. The only person who did vote for him was his own alliance. And the reason? Because everybody else on the team doesn't trust him and think he could be a problem to the remaining women. Victory Bell points out that while he was a former drug addict, he would never assault anyone or be racist. But most of them don't believe him anyways, and he just leaves. However, Bayleaf is unhappy about this. Somebody lied about Victory Bell and got away with it. But who? The other members of her alliance don't know how to process this either. They thought he did assault people and be racist, but he denied it. Now what do they do? In the end, they decided to take a break from this whole sniffing around the past bit because they don't want to spread lies like that again. Or at least some of them don't. We'll get to that. As this is going on, the Pikachu twins are just enjoying their time in the game, making friends with people and all that. Not really much again, but here's where it comes into play. Corsola sees this as a potential threat for later on in the game, and begins taking action to take them down next time either team loses. When Corsola presents this idea to the Alliance, and they agree that those two could be a problem later down the line, they consider throwing the challenge to get rid of one of them, but Bayleaf and Altaria shut it down. Meanwhile, Pinsir and Gyarados begin to form a friendship/bond with Bayleaf after finding out she didn't believe the lies about Victory Bell, and even talking to him about the story, which could be helpful for her and them later down the line. Now, as for why it sounds like I'm summarizing shit instead of going into further detail, well, the script is already 4 pages long, and considering I'm going over a whole season, and I haven't even reached the merge yet, I'd rather not make this an hour-plus long video and run the risk of boring you. So, yeah, for those who expect a lot more information, I'm sorry. I can't really think of a segue for this bit. Okay, why don't we just move on to Tyranitar losing again and eliminating Pikachu because he was a potential social threat to some of these players. Okay, Peachy uses this as a chance to improve themselves in the game and decides to work on their social/physical game while they still can. Speaking of physical, it's in the same episode Pikachu is eliminated, Bagon evolves into Shelgon. Still has that busted up limb though, but he's able to power through it easier than before in this new form, so yeah, there is that. A couple nights after the elimination, Togekiss finds out that Gyarados in her past sexually harassed her ex after a breakup to the point of nearly getting arrested, and the other members of Team Tyranitar believe her, including Camerupt. Gyarados tells Pinsir and Bayleaf that she did stalk her ex for some time after they broke up, but after being called out for it and her getting therapy, she stopped. And now she's on good terms with her ex. So, yeah, Bayleaf isn't sure who's telling the truth, so when she asks Togekiss about it, she shows Bayleaf a newspaper detailing that Gyarados did get somewhere, but doesn't specify where, which makes things even muddier than before. But in the end, Gyarados is sent home since Tyranitar lost again, and it's revealed that Gyarados was telling the truth after all when Bayleaf and Altaria do a bit more research, because they find out the paper was written before the ex gave the full story. But to give Team Tyranitar a break, Team Typhlosion does lose the next challenge, and while they do consider getting rid of Pinsir initially, Bayleaf shoots down the plan and instead targets Haunter to get rid of some quote-unquote dead space. I put in air quotes because, while Haunter wasn't making alliances or anything, she was making friends with people like Peachy, Altaria, and Pinsir, and that could potentially spill over to an alliance later down the line, which is the last thing Bayleaf's alliance needs right now. However, Camerupt does find something shocking about Pinsir's past and tells everyone on both teams about it. The next day, everyone hates Pinsir and wants him out, and he doesn't understand why. This vitriol is so bad that he considers quitting, but decides to stick around because he might as well go out the normal way. Even Bayleaf hates his guts right now, and that's the last thing he wanted. But when his team throws the challenge and he goes to elimination, Raichu throws a curveball their way and reveals that Pinsir is safe. Everyone is furious at this, but Raichu then reveals Camerupt fabricated a story about Pinsir, a serious one, and will be disqualified for making such a huge claim and lying about it, especially after contacting the person involved. The story, you might be asking? Well, Camerupt saw a story of Pinsir getting acquitted of rape, and she spun that into him raping someone and getting away with it, when in actuality, it was the other way around. Pinsir was accused of rape, but it was revealed the person who made the claims lied and got arrested for it, leading to Pinsir's acquittal since it was proven that Pinsir was innocent. Pinsir is furious, as is Bayleaf. She trusted Camerupt, and she pulled this shit? But Camerupt says that she's not lying, and knows Pinsir did it. But after that rant, she's removed, and everyone apologizes to Pinsir later that night for what happened. Pinsir, despite being a bit salty, and rightfully so, does ultimately forgive most of them for it, and him and Bayleaf also make up, and even become a couple some days after this. But it's after this moment that Bayleaf decides to make a new alliance, since she can't trust Altaria, Corsola, or Togekiss anymore, since they also lied before, and could be just as bad as Camerupt was. So she decides to make a new alliance with herself, Pinsir, Peachy, Shuckle, and Shelgon, who evolves into Salamence in the same episode Camerupt was eliminated in, and the action that caused him to evolve was him telling off Camerupt for all that she did, including coddling him like a child. Basically, his moment to be a man succeeded and he turned into a man. Also, yes, Shuckle and Bayleaf became friends. Again, sorry, but I'm trying to summarize this to prevent this video from becoming too long. I really hate having summarized this shit. And this video is still probably going to be long anyways. Fuck. We're at the merge now, and it's also at this point the award system like votes are removed, and yeah, we're back to highest votes leaves the game. RIP. So the remains of Bayleaf's alliance decide to target Bayleaf's new alliance as revenge for her screwing them over, but Altaria suggests going after the floaters first, since they have the chance to defect over to Bayleaf's alliance, and then Bayleaf's old alliance would get slaughtered in the next few rounds. Corsola and Togekiss consider this. However, Corsola is mad at Altaria for this, because Corsola wants to be the leader, and Altaria is trying to usurp it, at least in her mind. So the first part of the merge is Bayleaf's new alliance versus her old alliance, with Crobat just chilling and not getting involved in this shit. Speaking of, Crobat wins immunity, and Bayleaf also evolves into Meganium in this first challenge as a merged team. So since Crobat is safe, Corsola and the others consider targeting Meganium this time, but after this, Togekiss and Altaria talk to Peachy and Crobat respectively to try and convince them to target Meganium, but it's Altaria's conversation with Crobat after the first attempt on her end that things get interesting, as instead of convincing Crobat to vote Meganium, she convinces Crobat to vote for somebody else that no one would expect. But Togekiss notices this, and she spills to Meganium that Altaria is targeting them and states they forced her to comply. Meganium tells this to her new alliance, and even states it's likely fake, but then they begin to consider, what if this is a ruse to bust out an immunity idol and have them waste their votes? Also, yes, I know that wasn't a thing in the original TPA, but again, this is made in modern day. Modern day TPIs, at least for the most part, seem to have these kind of advantage things, or hidden immunity idol-like devices, so yeah, that's kind of why I'm mentioning it here. They consider their choices, and then we get to elimination. At elimination, it's a four-way tie between Togekiss, Meganium, Altaria, and Shuckle, with Corsola getting only one vote. So with 4 people unable to vote, the remaining 5 vote, and in a stunning surprise, they deadlock. 2 votes Togekiss, 2 votes Shuckle, and 1 vote Meganium. Meganium is confused by this, and then Raichu explains what the deadlock is. They will reconstruct a camera reel to completion. First one to do so is safe. In a close race, Shuckle wins the challenge, and Togekiss is sent home. However, this elimination does put a lot of strain on both alliances in terms of trust. So despite it being a predictable elimination, this does leave an impact going forward. Meganium and Pinsir don't know if Peachy or Salamence can be trusted, Corsola doesn't trust Altaria or Crobat, etc. And this spills into the next challenge, as during a wrestling challenge, most of the alliances are at each other's throats, and Salamence gets it the worst, getting crapped on physically. But he's able to power through all that despite getting injured heavily, and still having a busted up limb still, and he wins immunity that round. At the next elimination, there's another tie, this time between Meganium, Crobat, Shuckle, and Corsola. All 4 had 2 votes. But in the revote, Shuckle is sent home in a 2-1-1 vote, to everyone's surprise. Meganium is mad, but it's at this point she hardens her resolve and restructures her alliance to deal with their shit, basically trying to fix the whole trust issue shit. However, despite this, Peachy and Salamence are still less trusting of Meganium, and they know their place on her totem pole after the other alliance is gone, and these two begin to work together to survive this game, forming their own mini-alliance. Corsola and Altaria are still at each other's throats in this point, even after Altaria tries to apologize for what happened, but Altaria and Crobat are able to form a mini-alliance, so something worked out. Meganium wins the next challenge, and Corsola's alliance decides to target Pinsir. Crobat decides to go for Pinsir as well, and Meganium's alliance targets Crobat to try and prevent another major shakeup in the game. As a result, Crobat's eliminated in a 4-3 vote. Corsola and Altaria, after a long and heartfelt conversation, finally make amends, and they decide to go for Meganium one last time. Altaria and Pinsir also begin forming a bond/friendship after all that went down, when Camerupt got the boot ultimately, and Pinsir does finally forgive Altaria for what happened with Camerupt's actions. Meganium begins to think that Salamence could be a big threat after dealing with Corsola's alliance, and thinks of targeting him first after that alliance is dealt with to prevent him from winning the game. Peachy wins immunity, and on elimination, Corsola finally gets the boot in a 4-2 vote, leaving Altaria as the last of Meganium's former alliance standing. So the next plan of attack seems simple. Take out Altaria, and then it's Meganium and Pinsir versus Salamence and Peachy, right? Well, no. Pinsir wins immunity, but it's at elimination where things change. Instead of Altaria getting the boot, it's more like this.
Altaria.
La la la.
So, what happened? Well, Peachy and Salamence took initiative and helped Altaria with a hint to find the idol. Yep, that little idol bit mentioned earlier was relevant after all. Kind of like a little foreshadowing thing, even if it wasn't handled that well. Whoops. But if the votes for Altaria were negated, who was eliminated then? Well, that would be Meganium, with 3 votes from Altaria, Salamence, and Peachy. No chance in hell they were letting the person who formed 2 of the biggest alliances get to the end. It would be a sweep. Meganium is stunned by this, but congratulates the Final Four and Pinsir on getting far, as well as congratulating Salamence and Peachy for outsmarting her before leaving. And so it's the Final Four. Pinsir, Altaria, Salamence, and Peachy. But in a karmic sense of retribution for what happened last round, Pinsir wins the final immunity, and instead of voting Altaria, Pinsir gives up his immunity to her and votes for Peachy. Same with Altaria, but yeah. Which causes a tie between Peachy and Pinsir, which leads to a deadlock, and that means the film reel tiebreaker, effectively bookending the merge votes, with it starting with a deadlock and ending with one. And like the beginning deadlock, it's a close race, but Pinsir wins the challenge, and Peachy is sent home, leaving our 3 finalists. And yes, it's final 3, not final 2. However, instead of it ending in a final tribal-like situation, we got a final challenge situation. They've been competing in challenges based around movies throughout the entire season, so now they have to help make a movie based on their own lives in the game, and whoever makes the best one wins the game. Pinsir's movie is based on how he started out as a douchebag perv, but grew to be a better person, and fall in love and even improve socially. Altaria's is the story of her and how the other females were put down by the opposite sex until they stood up and took them down and grew to adapt to the game and take the control away from the men. And Salamence's is an underdog story, starting off weak but growing to be more strong and independent as the time goes on. Again, apologies if this wasn't as well detailed in the story thus far. I hate having to summarize this, and I think you get the point by now. Sorry. Altaria's movie ultimately gets 3rd place because it was mostly focused on their political message and not telling much of a story as a result. Basically, they said it didn't really have much of a story. Salamence wins 1st place, and Pinsir gets 2nd. The audience that voted liked Salamence's story and film more than Pinsir and Altaria's because it was basically an underdog story when it came to this character, and they felt it had a better story overall. Salamence congrats Pinsir and Altaria for doing a good job and vice versa, and Raichu gives Salamence the prize of the season. And this also helps out Raichu a lot more in the end, since the movie that Salamence made, he decided to publish that in theaters, and Salamence's movie beat out Gala Wars Episode 9 in the box office. Yes, I made a shitty pun. Whoops. So, yeah, there's my summary of the season and my what if of Nicky's TPA being made in present day. What did you think? What aspects of the initial TPA Nicky made would you change? Let me know in the comments below, and have a great day, everyone.